Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about a film director, very prolific film director, Sidney Lumet. Lumet made very many movies, quite a few famous ones: Network, Dog Day Afternoon, Serpico, 12 Angry Men. But a lot of his movies have sort of fallen through the cracks, and if nothing else, Lumet was a great director of performances of actors. And I've been curious. I've seen most of his movies, and even such movies like Bye Bye Braverman, Last of the Mobile Hotshots, which were, after being shown first run, were hardly ever seen again. I guess they were on VHS, but I don't think I've ever seen any of them, either of those two, and there's quite a few others as well. Today I want to talk about three movies. The first, and the main one, The Fugitive kind. This was a Criterion release in the last year or so, and it's an adaptation of Tennessee Williams' play, Orpheus Descending. I happened to see that play performed live in Philadelphia at the Wilma Theater many years ago, and I found it an excellent production. I'm a big Tennessee Williams and live theater fan anyways. It was reworked when Brando came aboard. It was reworked so that it would emphasize his character more. He was at the prime of his popularity, his good looks. He got $1 million, first actor ever to get $1 million for one movie. Also brought Anna Mignani from Italy. She had been in The Rose Tattoo before this, the movie version, and she was very uncomfortable with English, but she was very charismatic. She was quite a bit older than Brando. I think she was 51 at the time. They had a very, not a rocky relationship, but they didn't mesh that well together off screen, but on screen I think they had a couple of very powerful scenes in this film. And off in the corner by Brando's elbow there is Joanne Woodward, and she gives one of her liveliest performances. She's really good in this movie. If you like Joanne Woodward, you have to see her. She's sort of the bookend. She begins the movie, and she has been, this is set in a southern Mississippi small town. Brando has become disillusioned with his life. He's been kind of a party boy, a singer of no great renown, carries the guitar with him that he says is part of his life. Certainly the symbolism here. And Brando gives a very he seeks shelter, and he wants to go. He wants to go good. He wants to find something in his life. So he becomes a very unlikely clerk in a general store in this small Mississippi town. And Anna Mignani is the wife of the owner of this general store, and the owner is dying of cancer, so he's upstairs in a bedroom, and this is a very over-the-top kind of performance of by Victor Jory, and he's symbolizing the malignancy of the South, which Tennessee Williams very much understood or dramatized, felt the poetic soul of human beings being obliterated by the brutality that came from the years of slavery and segregation. Brando himself gives a very quiet performance. It's very understated. You might even say he's overplaying his underplaying. But he has some beautiful poetic scenes in the movie. Tennessee Williams was an expressionist. He wasn't a realist. Sidney Lumet, coming out of TV, was very much a realist, and I think he realized that. So he had his cinematographer, Boris Kaufman, emphasize in his black and white cinematography the shadowy expressionism, and the set designer also was instructed to aid in that feeling of expressionism. Lumet then would concentrate on the performances. There's one other performance I have to mention in this. It's very brief, by Maureen Stapleton. She is the wife of the brutal town sheriff, and she had played Lady, the Anna Mignani part, on stage, and she gives a very, and she's in brief singing. They're definitely, the performances are worthwhile, if nothing else, in this movie. And the movie was not a success, however, and it cost a lot of money. But I would rate it up there with the best of the Tennessee Williams movie versions. I probably like Baby Doll the most, and Streetcar Named Desire. I would put Fugitive Kind above some of the other productions. And Tennessee Williams was very successful through the 1950s in both his plays and the movie versions. He became very rich because the movies were successful, and he was a household name in a way that a playwright would never be nowadays. So I highly recommend that, the Fugitive Kind. I just want to briefly mention a couple of other Sidney Lumet movies that I saw recently. One was from 1966, and it's The Group, made from a Mary McCarthy best-selling novel. It's about a group of women graduates from a women's college in 1933, and it covers the years from 33 to, say, around 1942, the beginning of the war, World War II. And it sort of delineates their disappointments, the ideals of graduate. Begins with the graduation, ends with the death of one of the friends. I think there's 7 or 8. And the movie covers a lot of ground. It might have been more successful. The movie version was not successful if it had focused more on one of the girls, one of the women. But it covers a lot of topical subjects, spousal abuse. There's another scene where a boyfriend abuses one of the women. There's one of the women goes for birth control, and that's seen as shameful. Of course, this is in the 1930s and 1960s when the film came out. Probably wasn't as controversial. But the whole idea of women seeking their own way in life, it certainly, the movie itself certainly is part of has historical significance in the ongoing story of feminism. I've heard it's a cult film, and I sort of suspect maybe it's a cult film today in the sense that it's being laughed at. I would not laugh at the movie. The actors being used are basically television actors. They did not have success as movie stars. Larry Hagman is the abusive husband. It seems to be giving an audition to play JR in Dallas. Candice Bergen is only in it a few scenes, and they mostly just use her profile. And she's another topical subject. She goes to Europe, comes back, and she's a lesbian. And you don't see any of the comedic talent that Candice Bergen had. Murphy Brown, James Broderick is in it. Of course, he went into Family. And a lot of the other actors and actresses, even though they might not have had their own TV shows, they were primarily guest stars in different television series. But there's some good performances there. I particularly liked Elizabeth Hartman. I always feel a poignancy whenever I see her because she suffered from depression, and she eventually takes her own life when she was still a very young woman. And but she's good in this. She's a FDR, New Dealer Democrat, and she marries a Republican who tries to control her every bit of her life and her child's life. And she has a sort of comical acceptance in the irony. Why did I marry a Republican? The other performance I really like in this is Joan Hackett, who is sort of a wallflower. All these women, it's implied, have not had any kind of sexual experience during college. In 1933, that might have been believable, and but she does fall for an artist, a womanizing artist played by Richard Mulligan, and she realizes quickly that he's only interested in her for if she wants sex, and she takes that sort of in a realistic fashion. And Joan Hackett had a very good she could express both vulnerability and strength, and perhaps even perseverance in life. And she's very good in a later film, Western with Charlton Heston. I think it was called Will Penny. So I would recommend this. I greatly enjoyed it. It's a little choppy. It runs long, 2 hours, 20 minutes. I think a lot of it was cut. There were a lot more scenes that cut out. As I say, it covers a lot of ground on many characters. Like, for instance, there's no passage of time, so we go from one scene and then the next scene is maybe a year later, but there's no cut, there's no fade out. We just have to adjust ourselves that we're now in a subsequent time period. Another film that I saw recently, a Sidney Lumet film. In fact, it's the film that came after the group. Lumet, who's known for his New York City movies, went to London to film The Deadly Affair, and it's based on a novel by John le Carré, novelette really. It came out before The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which was le Carré's his first big best-selling novel. Deadly Affairs concerns George Smiley, and Smiley is the most iconic character out of all of le Carré's novels. Of course, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, the Carla trilogy. Alec Guinness played him, and of course Gary Oldman more recently. There's a good one. There's a good George Smiley character in a movie with Denholm Elliott playing the part. I think it was a TV movie in the 1990s. But in this movie, Deadly Affair, James Mason plays Smiley, and you wouldn't ordinarily think of James Mason. And the character is not named Smiley. The production company that owned The Spy Who Came In From the Cold also owned the rights to the name of the character, George Smiley. So he's called something different. So a lot of people don't realize this is a George Smiley story, mystery. And in the way it's told in the book and in the movie, you almost can see it as that John le Carré could have wrote a whole series of Smiley mystery stories, much as Maigret or Poirot were, but he didn't do that. And even The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, subsequent book, Smiley's in it, but very little. And he appears off and on through a lot of the other novels as well. In this movie, like I say, set in London, and I think it's one of the interesting parts of the movie because we get to see that the locations are used very well, especially the nighttime locations. So London becomes a kind of character. Mason is good. Like I say, I think he's sort of miscast, but he was a terrific actor. He's very eloquent in his elocution, great voice. Simone Signoret is in it in a small part in the mystery, and it's a very satisfying mystery. The movie does emphasize Smiley's wife in a way I don't think the book did, and I don't think le Carré ever did in his novels. The wife is played by Ingrid Thulin, who was part of Ingmar Bergman's film stock company, and in the movie, she's in the books and in other movies, the wife is just seen as sort of a haunting kind of haunting Smiley because she has had affairs on the side. In the context of this movie in the 1960s, a woman who did that was considered a nymphomaniac. A man might have just been a philanderer. And there's a couple other very good performances in this, and I wouldn't recommend these movies too highly, except for The Fugitive kind, which I do recommend. But I think they're both interesting films with interesting performances in it, and that you can always expect that out of Sidney Lumet. Looking over his subsequent filmography, I'm looking at maybe a double billing of Prince of the City Q&A. I'm really looking at a film that I enjoyed a lot. One of his few out-and-out comedies that was called Just Tell Me What You Want with Ali MacGraw and the comedian Alan King, who I remember being very funny in this movie. But if you have any movies of Sidney Lumet that sort of are under the radar that you've enjoyed, please leave them in the comments section. And otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. So long.